Minister, the last time I debated with you here, you made the astounding statement about our international reputation on homelessness, and a constituent wrote an email to me about those. I'll just read a little bit before I give my presentation. So, dear Taoiseach, but it mentions you as well. I write this email to convey my concern and absolute disagreement with recent comments made by Eileen Gleeson of the Dublin Regional Homeless Executive, Minister of State Damien English and yourself, as in the Taoiseach. I won't repeat the comments, but Minister English's comments about his concern for Ireland's reputation abroad were particularly galling. I write this not as someone living on the margins or at risk of homelessness, or as someone with any political motivation, but as a concerned citizen of Ireland and a resident of Castleknock, Dublin 15, who is fortunate to have a well-paid job. You could say I'm one of the people who get up early in the morning, to use the Taoiseach's words. Now, I don't have time to read you the whole, but I think you get the tenor, that if you think you, the Taoiseach, the Minister and the homeless officials, housing officials who are representing your agenda, think that this is going down well among people, you know, your particularly contemptible attitude towards homelessness, you're wrong. And I could read you the rest of it, but I really don't have time. I'll send it on to you. But I'd like to begin by congratulating the government for breaking a record, the highest number of rough sleepers, as my colleagues have said, since records began 10 years ago. 184 in Dublin in one night, plus 50 in the Merchant Quay Cafe, not able to get somewhere. They're not counted, by the way, in your department's official homelessness report of October 2017, which counts only private, supported or temporary emergency accommodation, you know, people who are availing of that. So the homeless figures are obviously limited. But in Dublin now, there's 3,536 adults homeless, and nationally 5,298, and 3,194 dependents, in other words, generally children. Now, obviously, we have the numbers on the housing lists, but as Peter McVerry, who, again, your colleague tried to use as a partner, I think the word was, said, this doesn't include sofa surfing, it doesn't include people in massive overcrowding, staying with families. You know, we have many parents with 2 children in rooms and grandchildren in those rooms, or it doesn't include people in completely insecure and unaffordable accommodation. And the fact that these anti-homeless people devices are being led by state agencies, Minister, is particularly shocking, including Waterways Ireland, who should be condemned for what they're doing, and you should issue an instruction tomorrow that they desist from doing that. You've obviously stopped counting homeless deaths, but 345 people have died on the streets from 2005 to 2015, but it's sharply increased, the number of males in particular. So this is a serious problem of on-street homelessness, but it's all related. It's related to the people who are in emergency accommodation, and it's related to people on the housing list, and it's also related to the people that you try to represent in Fine Gael, or claim to represent, which is people struggling to pay mortgages and rents. It's all interrelated. And you asked for a solution. It's not a mystery. We don't need to go searching for solutions. We don't need special committees. The solution is very simple. It's public lands and public homes. Because yesterday it was revealed on RTE by a planner, Mel Reynolds, that local authorities have 12,000 hectares of land that could provide at least 38,000 homes. That's not mentioning NAMA, it's not mentioning other state agencies, it's just the councils themselves. They're already zoned, they're already serviced. This is not, you know, on-zoned land. But yet Dublin City Council last year built 56 public homes. Fingal, my own council, built 10. Now, Minister, why is that when the resources are sitting there, they're not being deployed? That just brings home there's an ideological reason and issue here. It's not because, as your previous, the Minister said, you don't want mono-tenured estates. It's because there's been a change in policy in the last number of decades, whereas in the 70s, 8,000 to 9,000 public homes were built by local authorities routinely. That's gone now. Neoliberalism reigns for the last 20, 25 years in particular. And that particular Thatcherite philosophy says no society exists, and it slashes public housing. And it demonises people in local authority and public housing. But the unfortunate thing is that, for ordinary people, of course, the private sector is on strike. Land has been hoarded. We know this. And there's no willingness on the part of private developers to build until prices rise even more than they are. And they're certainly rising relentlessly. So it is working very, very well, as my colleague in the opening of the debate showed, for a very small number of people. I just want to briefly, before I go on, to give you a few examples of what could be done, take up your opposition to the bill. I think one of the reasons that was given was that there could be unintended consequences of squatters' rights. Minister, you have to be in a place for 12 years to have squatters' rights in this country. You know, the excuses that have come up, they've actually been very funny, in fairness, particularly Fianna Fáil's. We've heard everything from concern to travellers, burglars. I mean, they must be the dumbest criminals if they can't overcome a few spikes and a sprinkler system. We've heard it all, and clearly Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have decided that the business, class that they ably represent at the best of times shouldn't have to suffer the terrible difficulty of having to apply for planning permission for these devices. Now, of course, this is not a solution to the housing crisis. If you recall, Minister, we put a bill last January which could have banned most of the evictions that have taken place in the last 10 months, sale of a property, and now the new one, of course, refurbishment has been resorted to. But you turned your back on those. We've come forward with other solutions. This bill is designed to highlight your attitude in particular to the homeless. Now, you asked for solutions and you said you never hear of any. But if all the local authority land that I mentioned was actually used and planned, alongside acquisition of the almost 200,000 vacant units that we have in the country, everybody would have a house. So that's the solution. We have in Dublin West, which is the Taoiseach's constituency, as you know, a proposal. And I challenge you now if you're going to support it. The proposal is that there's 90 acres of council land in the Greater Blanchardstown area that the council have sat on for a number of years and have not come forward with a plan to develop. You could comfortably build, without any high density, at least 1,100 homes there, a mix of apartments and a mixture of houses. You could create a community with parks, facilities, an outdoor fitness area, youth centre. We've called it Damastown Village, and we've suggested a way that it could be developed. It's not mono-tenure. By the way, if you want to ban mono-tenure, change the local authority rules. Very simple, Minister. Allow more people onto it. But we're proposing that 50% will be affordable housing, mortgages for the very people who are suffering, paying massive rents, half of their income in some cases. And the other half would be social housing for people who are obviously homeless in the area, but also on the social housing list for many years. We've had an architect draw up plans because it's something that Fine Gael County Council hasn't bothered to do in the last number of years, despite the homeless crisis escalating in the area. We can pass that on to you as well. The cost of this would be around 170 million. You say money's no object. Michael Noonan said there was no shortage of money, but half of that, 87 million, would be paid for by the affordable mortgage aspect and would actually accrue profit of about 15 million over the 25 years of those mortgages, allowing money to be paid for community centres and community infrastructure. And the other half would require Fine Gael using the capital budget it has, borrowing 10 million from the housing finance agencies and an injection from the Department of 48 million. Not a huge ask, actually, if you consider 35% of the homeless problem in Dublin is in Fine Gael County Council, despite it only having 22% of the homeless population. So I'd ask you, Minister, if you're prepared to support something like that, or do you want to leave people who are working to go up the road to Hansfield, where McGarrell Riley, who's one of the Paradise Papers people, by the way, is selling houses at $315,000, which the Taoiseach thinks is affordable. Houses here could be sold for about $170,000. You know, it's being done in Ballymun, so it shows it can be done here. Why isn't this being done, Minister? You say you don't need cross-party support. You won't get cross-party support from us because there's an ideological divide here. There's parties like Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, who are committed and put all the emphasis on the private market, and then there's other parties who believe in the public need being prioritised. So we don't need cross-party support. We actually need a left alternative to be built and strengthened in this country. And we need a left alternative that would break the EU rules for the common good, that would commandeer wealth and resources to end the crisis, that would pass emergency laws to stop evictions and would run society, not in the interest of the 1%, the vulture funds and the developers, but in the interest of working-class people as a whole.
Thank you very much.